I raised my son alone after his father left us, as if we were forgotten baggage. I gave him everything. I slept little, ate less, but he never knew what hunger was. When I lost my sight, I thought I would at least have his love, but he put me in a nursing home and never came back. I remember exactly the color of the sky on the day he was born, a blue that no longer exists, washed away by time and the things he made me feel afterwards. It wasn't an easy birth, no birth is, but what marked me was not the physical pain, but the fear of not being enough. I wasn't married. His father had disappeared as soon as the pregnancy test came back positive, as if he was waiting for the result to come back. We didn't fight. He just disappeared. He disappeared from my life like a burned-out light bulb in an old house. And since then, it's just been me and my boy. I had to swallow my pride and accept what was coming. I worked as a waitress, a cleaner, a caregiver for the elderly. Ironic, right? Even washing clothes in other women's homes, many of them with children who hated washing their own dishes. I'd come home with my hands cut from all the soap and my back aching from squatting, but he always had enough to eat. He never slept in the cold. He never knew what it was like to share a stale loaf of bread between lunch and dinner. I gave him everything, even what I didn't have. I sold my mother's wedding ring to pay for his first school uniform. I sold the stove when the rent was 2 months overdue, but I didn't complain, because he smiled. And that smile of his was the only thing that reminded me that I was still people. He grew up handsome, intelligent, the kind of boy his teacher called promising. I used to take cake to sell at the school gates, in the sun and wind, just so he could hang out with the others without feeling less. When he hugged me in front of his classmates, I cried in hiding afterwards. I thought it was working, you know? I thought love was enough. But there's one thing no one warned me about. A child isn't a debt you pay off. You can give them the world, but that doesn't guarantee that they'll look at you with gratitude. And sometimes they won't. The years went by like dragging feet, one bad job after another, one health crisis after another, until my eyesight began to fail. First, it was just blurry. Then it turned to darkness. I lost the right to drive, then to walk on my own, then even to read his name in the messages he didn't send. The doctors said it was degenerative. There was no cure, just a slope where I was pushed without seeing the end. At first, he was there for me. He sent messages, asked if I'd eaten, but he never came. He always said that work wouldn't let him, that the city was far away, that life was busy. I understood, not least because that's what I taught him. Be understanding, be patient, don't get in the way. I never wanted to weigh on his life, but it did. I felt it. When I went blind for good, he showed up with a nervous smile and a form. It's temporary, Mom, just until things settle down. It was a home, one of those places with the smell of old mint and loneliness hanging on the walls. He took me there like someone takes a piece of furniture that no longer fits in the house. A month later, he stopped calling. Nobody told me that this was the end of the love between mother and son. They always said it was eternal, that a mother is forever. They lied. At home, they treated me well. Food on time, the right medicines, a clean bed. But it's not about that, you know? It's about the touch that never comes, the visit that never arrives, the absence that weighs heavier than any illness. It's about listening to other old people being called grandpa by grandchildren who bring flowers, while the only sound that visits me is the footstep of a nurse bringing another tasteless tray. One day, I heard one of the staff say that I was that lady who was left by her son. The phrase stuck with me for weeks. Not the blind one, not the lady in suite 204, but the one who was left by her son. As if that was all that was left of me. And maybe it was. I've become a nagging memory in his head. Someone he thinks he's done enough for having fed with rice and a pillow for 20 years. But being a mother is more than that. Being a mother means carrying on after exhaustion, after loss, after blindness. And being a son should be too. But he never understood. And maybe I was wrong not to show him. Maybe I was wrong to love him so much that he thought it was an obligation. Now, sitting in a chair that creaks, on a balcony I can't see, surrounded by voices I don't recognize, I write with the fingers of my heart what my eyes can no longer reach. I was a mother. I was whole. And he left like someone who changes the channel on a program that has become too boring. Perhaps outside, he'll tell me that his mother died years ago. And maybe, in a way, he's right. Because the day he left me here, without looking back, was the day he switched off the last light in my life. We never imagine that we'll end up alone, not even when everything points to it, not even when the signs are there, day after day, like little messages from fate, whispering that no one will stay, that the love we've given won't come back, that effort doesn't bring applause, and that, in the end, even the children learn to live without you with a speed that hurts. For the first few months in that home, I was still waiting. I expected to hear the sound of his name on the reception desk. I expected to smell the woody perfume he wore when he came to visit me in hospital. I expected him to come into the room with a box of cookies and a, "Hi, Mom, how's it going here?" But he never came. Never again. Not once. And it wasn't even far. They put me in a home 32 minutes from where he lived. It's not a guess. I heard a nurse comment when she saw his address on the admission form. And yet he disappeared. What came instead was a heavy silence, the kind that settles into your chest like a second skin. At first I cried. Crying seemed like the only thing I could do. But then, when even crying began to embarrass me, I stopped. I kept quiet. And then the silence stopped being something around me. It became part of me. It's strange to depend on people who don't know anything about you, having to explain every day that I like my milk warm, but not hot, that I can't stand sweet food for lunch, that I don't want to bathe in cold water, even if it's summer. Every detail of my routine has become a request, a favor, a flawed memory in the head of someone who just wants to do their shift and leave. And I don't blame anyone, because no one is paid to love. Loving was my job. I was the one who loved him. Sometimes, in silence, I would find myself rehearsing what I would say if he turned up. I'd think of 1,000 ways to ask why he'd disappeared. "Do you still remember me, son?" Or, "Was it so bad being my son?" But every time I rehearsed, there was a low, rumbling anger inside my stomach. Because I wasn't supposed to ask. He was the one who had to explain. He was the one who had to come with the words ready. Because abandonment, even when it's disguised as a rational choice, is still abandonment. Over time, other visitors began to disappear too. Some ladies received their grandchildren at weekends. Others saw their children every couple of months. But they all had someone. I was the exception. I was the one the staff looked at with pity. That poorly disguised pity, which nobody says out loud, but which you can feel in the way they speak slowly to you, as if they were afraid of breaking what's left. I became part of the furniture of the place, always sitting on the balcony, always facing the garden that I couldn't see, but which they said was beautiful. They told me about the flowers, the white bench in the center, the birds that came in the morning. But everything was black to me, and not just because of my blindness. It was black inside, like a damp cloth that never dries. One day, a new employee came into the room and asked if I wanted her to do my hair. I said yes. She started slowly, running the comb through the thin strands that remained of what had once been my full head of hair. And suddenly, she began to sing softly, an old lullaby, the same one I used to sing to my son when he had a fever. It tore me apart. My empty eyes filled with water. I cried quietly, ashamed, like a child afraid of punishment. She stopped and asked me if it hurt. I just shook my head. It did, but it wasn't the scalp. It was the memory. It was the sound of that song echoing inside me like a cruel joke from the universe, because I looked after him so hard, with so much surrender. How many nights did I stay up measuring fever with the back of my hand? How many times have I washed a sheet with vomit on it without frowning? How many times did I go to the market without knowing if the money was enough for rice and soap? He never saw that. He never knew. And now he doesn't care. When I had my birthday, Nobody remembered. Not even the staff. Neither did he. I waited all day, waiting for a nurse to come in with a hastily bought cake, waiting for the phone to ring, but the phone didn't ring. No candles were lit, no out-of-tune happy birthday, nothing. Just the night coming earlier than usual and the sound of the dinner trolley passing in the hallway. The following week, a gentleman from the room next door died. His name was Tom. He wasn't very talkative, but he always said good morning. I found out about the death when I heard the hurried movement of the nurses, the whispers, then the silence, a different, deeper silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, had someone warned his son? Did his son come? Did he cry? If I die here, will anyone know? This question stayed with me for days. It stuck in the back of my throat, scratching like shards of glass, because deep down I know the answer. He wouldn't come, not even to see the body, nor to pick up my few belongings. And maybe that's the end that awaits me, to die in a strange place, surrounded by people paid to look after me, with a file on the computer saying, no visit, no contact, no reply. That destroys me more than blindness, because I haven't just lost my sight. I've lost my place in the world. My only blood tie was cut off like a paper cutter, without guilt, without ceremony. And while he lives outside, probably saying that my mother is being well looked after, I slowly rot inside a white room where the clock never changes rhythm, and daylight is just a theory told by others. And yet, I keep waiting. Even though I can't see, I still turn my face when I hear footsteps in the corridor. I still fix my hair when someone knocks on the door. I still pretend to believe it when an employee tells me that he must be busy and that he'll show up soon. But deep down, I know. He turned off the light, and he didn't even look back to see if I was still breathing. What revolts me most, more than the abandonment, even more than the physical pain of existing in a skin that has grown old without being seen, is the way people justify this kind of disappearance. There's always a ready-made excuse, a rehearsed phrase, almost beautiful, almost poetic. He must have a busy life. It's hard to deal with a parent's grief. At least he left you in a good place. Always that, at least, as if it would wipe away the dried blood that dripped from my soul when he turned his back. It's funny how the world always tries to protect those who leave. It's always easier to understand the side of those who leave than those who stay. I became the abandoned woman who must have done something wrong, the mother who perhaps demanded too much, who perhaps suffocated. Maybe she was strict. It doesn't matter that I starved him to eat. It doesn't matter that I went without sleep so he could rest. It doesn't matter that I lost my youth, my vanity, my dreams. All this becomes, maybe she didn't give as much love as she thought. The blame always falls on the one who was left behind, and I carry that guilt even though I know it's not mine. Because that's what happens to people who love too much. You keep trying to understand where you went wrong, even when the truth is that the other person just didn't want to carry your weight anymore. I became uncomfortable, difficult to fit into his routine, a constant reminder of everything he didn't want to deal with. He didn't know how to live with my blindness. He didn't know how to accept that he was now the one who had to look after me. But I never wanted to be a burden. I never asked for anything but presence. People in here get used to abandonment in different ways. Some deny it. They say the children are coming. They're just taking their time. Others romanticize it. They say they raised their children to fly, and that's just the way it is. Life goes on. But me? I swallow. I fake it well. I've learned to smile with an empty face, to say good morning like someone repeating a mantra without faith. Because if I show too much sadness, they say it's depression, and fill my tray with medicine. It's not depression. It's absence. It's a hole. It's a lack of ground. On the television in the common room, there are auditorium shows with people shouting out awards, hugging presenters. I hear it as if it were a forgotten language, a sound coming from a life that was never mine. I no longer have any images in my head. They're fading slowly. I can no longer remember his face. All I know is that he had a strong jaw and a chin that always trembled when he cried. I wish I could remember more. But memory is cruel when you get older. It decides what to leave behind and what to take away. And it seems to have decided to leave me with everything that hurts. The other day, an employee asked if I wanted to record a voice message for him. They said he might be touched. I said no, because if a blind mother, alone, in a home where no one visits her, wasn't enough for him to be moved, then no amount of embarrassed voices will. The truth is that he doesn't want to listen, because listening requires action, and he doesn't want to act. He wants to get on with his life with a clear conscience. And I've become just a paragraph that he skips when he tells his own story. My mother? She's in a good place. She's well looked after. I bet that's how he says it. As if he were talking about a dog he gave away when he moved into a small apartment. Sometimes I think it would be more dignified to die. Not out of despair, but out of exhaustion. Because living in this state of waiting with no return is like bleeding forever without having the chance to die. I don't even know how many of his birthdays I've spent alone here. I always bought him a present, even when he was grown up. A book, a t-shirt, a simple cake. Now, he doesn't even send a message. Not even a cold line of text. Nothing. And the worst thing is that I still think of him when I hear the sound of cars in the parking lot. I still turn my face instinctively, as if my eyes, which can no longer see, might catch some familiar presence. It's a kind of emotional reflex that won't die, even when the body has given up. It's as if a part of me still doesn't understand that he's deleted me from his life, like someone who deletes a photo that no longer matches their feed. The other day, a younger, newly hired employee said, "If I had a mother like that, I'd look after her every day." And I wanted to laugh. Not because I thought it was cute, but because I know that sooner or later, she too will stop being moved. She'll get used to my lack of visitors, my still face, my mute existence, because everything becomes a habit, even other people's sadness. Last night, I dreamt about him. It was a soundless scene, but I knew it was him. He was in a white house, with clean walls and large windows, and I was standing outside in the rain, knocking on the door. He looked out of the window, saw me but didn't open it. He just looked, with a neutral expression. No pain, no pity, just indifference. I woke up with my bedclothes wet with sweat. It took me a while to remember where I was. Reality came back like a warm slap. The white room, the smell of cleaning products, the sound of slow footsteps in the corridor. And I understood. Even in my dreams, he has already abandoned me. That's what nobody says about getting old like this. It's not just the body that fails. It's the soul that begins to accept contempt as normal. It's the heart that stops asking for affection because it's understood that, for some people, affection has an expiration date. Perhaps the most tragic thing about all this is that I don't wish him harm. I don't want him to suffer. I don't want him to feel what I felt. I just wanted him to know. For him to understand what it's like to be forgotten by the one you raised with all the love you managed to squeeze out of a difficult life. I wanted him to know what it's like to exist in a place where no one pronounces your name, where even time passes without noticing you. But he won't know, because to know, you have to be willing to feel. And he shielded himself a long time ago. He took me out of his life as lightly as you turn off a light before going to sleep. And now, I'm left here, in literal and symbolic darkness, waiting for a miracle that I know won't come, because he chose to forget. And I, without being able to see, have been left behind by the one I once carried in my arms, thinking that love was enough. Time in here isn't measured by days of the week. It's measured by sounds. The sound of the trolley with the trays at 7 in the morning, the sizzle of the television in the common room at 9, the medicine whistle at noon, then the silence of the afternoon, which weighs more than any night. Time, for those who wait in vain, does not pass. It slips away. It leaks through your fingers. And the next thing you know, you're a month older, a year more invisible, one less memory for someone out there. I've started to forget dates. I don't know what day of the week it is anymore. I just know that it's another day that he didn't come. When people try to situate me, I lie. I say I still remember his birthday, his graduation, the name of the company where he works. I don't. And that kills me slower than blindness, because prolonged absence erases everything. Even the good memories start to dissolve. One day you think, he was sweet as a child. The next, you don't know if you made it up for yourself as a comfort story. Maybe he never was. Maybe I just dreamt so much about the loving version of him that I ended up believing it. The home psychologist visited me the other day. Soft-spoken, light-footed, like someone stepping into a place where they might find shrapnel. She sat down by my bed and asked if I wanted to talk. I said no, but she stayed. She said that sometimes silence also speaks. And I wanted to laugh. Silence shouts at me every day. It wakes me up. It pushes me out of bed. It accompanies me in the shower, at meals, on the nights when sleep doesn't come. And it has the same sound as his name not being spoken. She asked if I had any photos of him. I don't. The last one I had was on his old cell phone, which he kept with him after mine broke. I said I only needed it until I bought another one. He took it and never gave it back. It's symbolic, isn't it? Even the last picture of it was taken from me. And even if he gave it back to me now, what good would it do? I wouldn't see it. Blindness stole his form, but it was silence that stole the rest. Sometimes I think about writing a letter, ask someone else to write it, since my hands are slower and my fingers are more tired. A simple letter, an outburst. But what for? He wouldn't answer. Maybe he wouldn't even open it. Maybe he'd throw it away before finishing the first line. With the same indifference with which he dumped my entire life on an old woman's bed. I feel like a letter that's never been opened, a story that no one else wants to read. There's a lady here called Ellen. She hardly speaks, but every Friday her son shows up. He arrives with flowers, hugs her tightly, helps her bathe, reads a book aloud. The other day he asked me if I wanted to listen too. I thanked him and said no, not out of pride, but because hearing a son read to another mother would hurt me more than the darkness. Every gesture of affection I see among others is a small but precise knife, a constant reminder of what I'm missing. I've thought about leaving, not from home, from life, but I don't have the courage. And perhaps that's what humbles me the most. I still have hope. I still carry the damned faith that, one day, he'll walk through that door. Maybe because I'm stupid. Or because love, when it's genuine, doesn't die even when it's stepped on. There's a hidden corner inside me that still waits to hear his voice saying, "I'm sorry, Mom." And that makes me angry with myself, because after everything, after all this loneliness, I would still accept a hug from him, as if that were forgiveness enough. Some days, I wake up angry, a muted anger. I think about everything I gave up to raise him. I remember the time I got sick and still went to work because he needed the money for the school trip. I remember the tooth that ached for weeks because the health insurance didn't cover it, and the money from the treatment went to buy him new sneakers. And what about him? He doesn't even know. He never knew. He never asked. And today, if he did, he might say that it was my choice, as if choosing between pain and hunger was really a choice. The other day, I overheard a conversation between two employees. They were talking about children who put their parents in nursing homes to get rid of the guilt. They say that this way they can sleep peacefully. And I thought, he must sleep so well. He must lie in a clean bed with a soft sheet and close his eyes thinking that he was a good son, that he gave me a decent ending. But this isn't the end. It's purgatory, a place where time is a constant reminder that you have been forgotten. And there's no pillow to ease that. I started pretending to pray, so as not to freak out. I put my hands together like I'm praying, but in reality, I'm just counting the minutes until the next meal, until the next shower, until someone says, "Good night," because those are the only moments when I hear a human voice talking to me. I don't want to die forgotten, but I know I will, because nobody comes, because he's not coming, and I'm still here, sitting, facing a garden I've never seen again, in a chair that makes my body ache, with a head full of questions that will never be answered. And yet, even now, if he were to appear, I would say, "Sit here. Tell me about your life." That's what destroys me the most, knowing that I'd still have a lap to hold for someone who never wanted to come back. Sometimes I wonder if the outside world even knows I exist, not the world of trees and birds, but the world of people. Whether someone crosses them in the street and thinks, "Is she still alive?" Or whether I'm just a memory that's barely filed away in a dark corner of the mind, the kind you don't want to visit anymore because it bothers you. I don't know, and maybe I'll never know. What I do know is that my body is no longer mine. It has become a kind of occupied territory, a house that still stands, but is already full of cracks. The thin arms, the spine, the legs that shake for nothing. Even my chest has lost its former rhythm. I was told the other day that my heart is weak, as if that was news. My heart has been weak for years, ever since I realized that too much love also destroys, especially when it only goes one way. At my last appointment, a new doctor held my hand and told me I needed to prepare, as if I didn't know. As if I hadn't been preparing since the day he left me here with that folder full of forms and empty promises. He said, "Mom, it's just for a while, until I get things in order." There was never any settling down. There was never any return. And that, "just for a while," became a sentence. I was never told that growing old meant being pushed to the margins where no one else looks, where the value of your existence is measured by how many good memories you still cause in others. If you cause pain, if you cause guilt, they disappear. It's easier. And that's what he did. He pushed me over the edge and turned his face away. And I, who spent my whole life wanting to protect him from the world, was left alone in it. Ironic, isn't it? In recent days, the pain has been more constant. I'm not talking about physical pain. I've learned to ignore that. I'm talking about the other one. The one that has no exact name. The one that tightens in the throat, that rips in the pit of the stomach, that burns behind the eyes even when there are no tears. Because crying, after a while, becomes a luxury. And I'm past the luxury stage. I'm in the essential phase. And yet I still lack the basics. Affection. I had a visitor this week. It wasn't him. Of course it wasn't him. It was a social worker. He wanted to update my details, find out if I had any close relatives. I gave his name, even though that doesn't change anything. She said she'd try to get in touch. I kept quiet. She doesn't understand. None of them understand. That you can't force contact. That telephones don't awaken dormant love. But I let her, because that's what they do. They record. They try. They write them down on papers that go into folders and then into drawers, where they die the same way we die here, in silence. The next night, they told me that they had called him. They said the line was active, that someone answered. They promised to call back. They didn't. I didn't expect them to. I just sat there listening to the news with the same expression with which I receive dinner every day. No surprise. No reaction. The abandonment repeated so many times loses its impact. It becomes routine. One of the nurses, who sometimes talks to me like someone who still believes I deserve better, sat down next to me and asked if I wanted to write something for him in case he showed up one day. I thought about saying no, but I stayed silent. And in the silence, she took it as a yes. She brought paper and a pen. She guided me with her fingers. I wrote, each letter like an unshed tear. And when I'd finished, I folded the paper and asked her to keep it. Maybe one day he'll read it. Maybe he won't. But it doesn't matter anymore. Because those words were for me. It was what I needed to say to let myself go, even if my body would still be here for a few more months. I've been dreaming more lately. I don't know if it's the body getting tired or the soul trying to escape. But in my dreams, I see light. I see faces. And sometimes I see him, small, with messy hair and a mouth full of chocolate milk. I see him running, telling me he loves me. In my dreams, he calls me mother in that sweet voice he used to. And I wake up with a damp bed and rumpled sheets, sometimes smiling, sometimes with a bitter taste in my mouth. Today is Sunday. or so I've been told. There's Mass in the small hall of the home. I went, not out of faith, but because it was a different place from bed. I sat in the front row and listened to the weak voices of the others trying to sing. Nobody really believes, I think, but everyone pretends. Because pretending that something good can still happen is what keeps us sane. A lady next to me shook my hand during the Lord's Prayer. I felt her fingers trembling, just like mine. When I got back to my room, I sat in the chair on the balcony, as usual, and I stayed there, listening to the wind rustle the leaves, smelling the world I could no longer see. And I thought, is he breathing that same air now? Could it be that, at some point during the day, he thought of me? Or am I just another dead record in the history of his life? And for the first time in a long time, I've accepted that maybe I'll never know. But if one day he reads this, if by some chance of fate someone delivers the letter, or if he wakes up with a broken heart and decides to look for it, I just want him to know one thing. I loved you more than I loved myself. And even now, after everything, if you open this door, my lap is still yours. Even if my body is already weak, even if my mind fails me, even if my light has been extinguished by you, I would still be able to rekindle it, just to see you come back. If you've made it this far, tell me something honest. How many times have you been abandoned and told you were too busy at the moment? Because sometimes, those we keep waiting are never the same again. And if you agree with me, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like.